All right. Well, welcome to a day in the life of someone who does video conferences all the time.
Yeah, always dealing with all the fun of fixing audio. Can you hear me now? So
Yeah. And in fact, what's really either sad or hilarious, depending on how you look at it, is we have a first grader in the house who's attending first grade remote, and it's really funny to hear the exact same conversations I have on a daily basis at work between a teacher and a bunch of first graders. Here, sweetie, can you go on mute? Hey, I need you to go on mute. It's the red button there. It's like, wow, I've worked with execs who have the same problem.
Yeah, they have no idea how to and you hear the clickety clack of their keyboard. So,
although what's really funny is there was a mom arguing, I guess, with her significant other the other day, and you could hear it over the kids webcast.
Yeah.
So that was entertaining.
I was reading an article the other day. It was, hey, parents, make sure you're wearing pants. So,
yeah, I don't find that surprising. I actually showered and am wearing pants today, so I'm looking forward to this.
All right, guys. So thank you everyone for joining. I really appreciate it. I think we can hit with all the folks on online first, and we get into the written AMA.
Yeah, I'm good with that. Although we did start a bit of a conversation about monitor setups, and we started getting in a little deep. And I said, wait, Brandon and I were just talking about this. So
yeah, and that was one of the questions, wasn't it? So
yeah, it's one of the pre-submitted questions. Mine's a very simple setup. I have dual 22-inch monitors that sit on monitor arms on my desk. Although Brandon's setup is much more interesting, and I think I might steal it.
Yeah, well, I have two ultra wides. One is the Lenovo ThinkVision P44W, and this it's essentially the equivalent of two 1080p 24-inch monitors side by side. And then above it, I have a Dell 34-inch ultra wide, and which is basically the equivalent of two 19-inch monitors side by side, I believe. So, and that one essentially is my email and chat, and then below on the P44 is the where I get all my real work done. My life, though, living in email usually ends up on the main display. But
actually, when my main device was a laptop, I'd have it hooked into a dock, but I'd have that monitor open, so it'd be a third monitor underneath my two floating 22s. Mm-hmm. And I actually use that as a communications screen only. It was email, it was chats, and then that way I could see what was going on without interfering with the with kind of my main workflow across the front.
Yeah, well, I also have should also mention this one. So I keep the laptop in clamshell mode on the dock. So I have an X1 6th gen with the mechanical dock, and but I do have another display. It's a 14-inch display that I do bring in occasionally when I need a little more real estate. But typically for typically stays in that mode. I don't have other displays for vertical. Occasionally I wouldn't mind having a vertical display, especially if I'm looking at, hundreds of lines of code. But otherwise I kind of stick with just my current setup. But I have thought about getting a third monitor, like a 27-inch display as that vertical. But I'm probably just going to stick with what I have.
Yeah, that was actually one of the follow-up questions was vertical monitors. And I've never used one. I could see a time when I was doing sysadmin work on a daily basis where that could have come in handy. But see, that was submitted by Toad Rocks Boat. Toad sent that in ahead of time on our discourse channel. So next question just popped up via Twitter, actually. Brandon, you want to give folks a quick update on where we're looking timeline wise for that missed IO video?
Oh boy.
I know, I threw you under the bus. I couldn't help it.
I've been so busy. That's coming. I have not had time to edit it. It's done. I just haven't edited the video. So it's coming. It's coming.
Yeah, between that power outage, getting ready for today, and as well
yeah, I've been
regular work things. It's been a little crazy for both of us the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's been insane.
Okay, so we do have quite a few pre-submitted questions, but I want to give preference to the folks in the room. So if anybody wants to unmute, ask a question, let's dive into this.
All right. I'm a production IT guy running his own production company. I've been helping with funeral homes and different other nonprofits. Sorry. We've been trying to do webcasting, and they've been thinking Zoom, but every time I have to use their equipment, and every time, since I'm running this company as open source, should I just bite the gun and update all my equipment on the camera side and get something that would work with my setup?
So I haven't done a lot with web conferencing these days. I'm more on the back end, but the way I've handled way I've seen this get handled in larger organizations, like in meeting rooms, is essentially building out using the certified hardware from that Zoom certifies, say, or Microsoft Teams, Blue Jeans, whoever it is. And that seems to have the best results. The hardware itself is not exactly what I would describe as affordable, but it's the path of least resistance. Now that being said, I've been working from home forever and coming up with the best ways of being able to handle like those video conferencing. Like I have another, like getting like cameras that are certified, or not, maybe not necessarily certified, but like I have a $1,000 Logitech webcam that I've put in my in my living room that's next to my office. So when I need to do like a big presentation where I want people to see my hand gestures and things like that, I move into that space. And Logitech has a great webcam for that, and it's about I can't really tell based on the size, but it's about a foot long.
Okay. I'll take a look at that. No, we've been trying to do, since we can't really do funerals that way, we've been trying to do more webcasting and everything else. They handed me an old camera, and I literally, when I went back to the Linux, everything started working again, and now that we're ramping up on this live streaming, and I'm like, I don't know what to do. I'll look into it though.
Yeah. Live streaming, like over, like if it's not web conferencing, like I don't know a lot about that. Like if it's like for YouTube, that's something I'm not an expert in at the moment.
No, we've been doing both conferencing, but it was mainly because of the funerals that we can't really have that many people. They keep going back and forth. All we want to do is let the people see their loved ones.
Yeah.
So
something you might think about doing is, I know OBS has plugins where you can use your own monitor or a video capture device that's plugged into your computer, and from there you can actually redirect the output into an application like Zoom or something. It's something I've been considering doing for my own work-based presentations, because it'd be nice to have kind of a picture-in-picture view with where I control what the picture looks like. Because between Google Meet and Zoom and Ring Central and all these other tools that are out there, Blue Jeans, what's the other one, Big Blue Button or something, between all those different platforms, your experience is different. So something I'm considering doing is redirecting my video output from my Logitech webcam through OBS. That way I can do the overlays the way I want them to look. So if I'm giving a presentation, I don't have to worry about how that's coming across. I can just run it through OBS. I can have my scenes pre-created, and then I can use that as either the source for the stream or for the video recording. So OBS, I'd have to look up what the plugin's called. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but that would be a good option.
What video capture cards works with Linux? I've been using Elgato for the last 3 months, and it's not working with my Linux setup.
Brandon, you have any thoughts on that one?
I don't. I haven't used video capture cards in probably 10 years.
So I think this would be
it's just been out of my wheelhouse.
I think this would be a good opportunity to plug someone who could answer these questions in his sleep. And I think that's almost literal, don't you think, Brandon? But on Tuesday nights, if you haven't heard, on Tuesday nights there is the Ask Noah show, and it's hosted by Noah Chalaya. It's on Tuesdays at 6 p.m. You can call in, ask him questions, and this is right up Noah's alley.
No, yeah, Noah knows that video capture stuff. He's probably the best I know in that space.
Yep, and I know he'd be more than happy to take your questions and. And could answer that a whole lot easier than Darren or I could.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so why don't we take another one off of our list? If I can type here. Let's see. So here's one Brandon and I definitely wanted to make sure that we covered. We were asked a few times, how do you transition from either an entry-level position like help desk to the next level up, whether that's systems administrator, security engineer? So, Brandon, if you want to take the first swing at that one.
Well, I got lucky with my first entry-level job. I was brought on to be a Linux desktop subject matter expert. Because the company I started at 15 years ago was migrating from Windows to Linux desktops. The entire organization. We weren't like a small 20, 30, 50 person company. We're talking 5,000 employees plus at the time. They were $2 billion in revenue at that time. And they were in the process of migrating off Windows 2000 and Windows XP to Linux. So I got lucky there. But going out of that niche of being a Linux desktop expert, or, I moved into other roles, but, breaking out of that was basically, I was a Linux expert, not a help desk guy. Right. I got lucky. That's not everyone. But like right out, like a lot of people I know that right out of college go to, can usually land like a decent entry level system administration job instead of a help desk job, or a solution architecture, sales engineer job, if that's the route they want to go. But kind of breaking out of the desktop space is really tough if you're a Linux, if you want to get into Linux. But my suggestion would be getting more into the if you're in help, in that help desk niche, is breaking into the Windows side first, because that's the perception that and once you get into that, you can break into the other spaces. I know, Eric, you have a story like that. So
I've answered this question enough times that I actually gave a talk about it last year itself. It was getting started with open source, and so with my background, I've been a technologist as long as I can remember. I've always wanted to work in technology. And so when I got started, it was kind of the same thing. I started out as an intern. I started out with desktop support, and that took a few years. That took 2 or 3 years, and eventually I was able to work at a company that I was a bit of a hybrid. I was working desktop support, but also some basic server support. And at that time, it was Active Directory and creating users, setting up email boxes in Exchange, that kind of thing. But one of the advantages I had was I tinkered with Linux on the side, and was able to unfortunately at that point in your career, there's a little bit of fake it until you make it. So I kind of had to pretend like I knew a little bit more than I did. So I came across a company that needed a full-time Linux systems administrator, and at least here in Kansas City in 2011-ish, there was a bit of a shortage for Linux systems administrators. So I was able to prove that yes, I've been a server administrator, and I know a little bit about this Linux thing. And one of the advantages that all of you in this room have over 2011 version of Eric was you all are doing things to further your career, doing things to further the cause of Linux more than I was. I actually came across the open source community after I spent years as a Linux systems administrator. So the fact that you're here, the fact that you're learning, the fact that you're participating in a community is a huge help. And so when I actually had this conversation offline with a couple of folks just last week, and one of the pieces of advice that I gave was put that on your resume. Include the fact that you're involved in the community, include the fact that you tinker in a home lab, and list your podcasts that you listen to if you have to. Just show that you have that drive, show that you have a desire to learn. And in a lot of cases, when you're trying to get that entry-level systems administrator role, a lot of times that's enough.
Showing the drive. That's mm-hmm. important. That's what landed my first job. So,
and to be honest, a lot of managers, a lot of team leads would rather you come in with good drive, with a desire to learn and not know as much, because then they don't have to unteach quote bad habits. They don't have to retrain you to do certain things the way that company does them. But you come in with a desire to learn and a good foundation, and they can build on that a whole lot easier than retraining someone who's more senior.
Yeah, my second job was actually how I landed. That was it actually needed a ton of MySQL experience, and I had none. But I had tons of Linux experience, and I actually was told I got hired because I was honest with the fact that I didn't know anything about MySQL. and but the guy I was competing against for that job just came up and lied, and obviously had no idea of what my how to even write a SQL query. And so it's like, I'd rather teach you than what you need to know than and the fact that you said I don't know was impressive in the interview. I mean, like, no, like, it's okay to say I don't know. It really is. And it's better to say I don't know than fake it and then bomb the job interview. You'll be thrown out faster than you were let in.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it's a fine line, but there's a difference between kind of faking it until you making it and just straight up lying.
Yeah.
So we did have a follow-up on that question, but if you had something more to add, Brandon, go.
No, I was just going to go look. I'm just looking at kind of a follow-up. If one of the questions we got on Discourse was, if I could go for a Linux certification, where would I start? What cert would I begin with? Does certification matter at all? I mean, from a Linux certification perspective, I still think the Red Hat certifications hold water still. I think they're for really one reason. They are practical exams. They're not multiple choice exams like other certifications. If you can't do the work, you're not going to pass the test. So it's that I still think they hold water, and I'm on my way to my RHCA, which is the Red Hat Certified Architect, which is the highest you can go. There are multiple layers on top. You can get, I think it's now RHCA level 20, but that those are probably less important for the at an entry level. But the RHCSA is awesome, and the new RHCE, you're basically certifying that you're an that you know how to do automation, because it's not so much around RHEL as it is around Ansible. Mm-hmm. So I think that's what's pretty neat about those courses. Now, outside of that, there's the Linux Foundation ones, and also SUSE's certifications. SUSE certifications. I had a SUSE certified Linux administrator at one point, and it was a lot like the RHEL, the RHEL certifications. So they're those are very, I think, very valid, especially if you're going into a shop that is a SUSE shop.
Well, and I mean, we really don't have to justify this, but I feel like it's worth noting that, we're not pitching Red Hat certifications because we work for Red Hat. I mean, myself, I came to work at Red Hat because of the experience that I had as a customer of the company over my career. One of the reasons why, kind of the next step of my personal journey was, once I got that Linux systems administrator, or once I got my first server administrator role, I was a hybrid between Windows and Linux. And I ended up making a decision a few years into that stage of my career to go strictly Linux. And I literally went through a phase where I had a Microsoft certified server administrator book, or whatever their tests were called back then. And then in the other hand, I had the RHCSA study guide. And I kind of compared the two. What do I want to do with my career? And the fact that Red Hat, even for as long as I've known, Red Hat has offered practical exams. And it's kind of back to that hiring manager's perspective of, do I want somebody who's book smart? Do I want somebody who can regurgitate all these definitions to me? Or do I trust someone who's actually gone in under testing conditions and created a user, expanded a disk, actually done the work, because I've met people with 3 or 4 certifications, and you ask them to go and fix an issue on a server, and they go,
Mm-hmm.
But when you go with someone with a practical certification like the RHCSA, you know a little bit better of what you're getting. That's not to say that having book knowledge isn't critical, especially, I mean, think about Kubernetes. There's how many different types of Kubernetes certifications these days?
Mm-hmm.
But there's also a huge demand and a huge shortage for people who understand how Kubernetes works. So having a Kubernetes type certification would still be valid.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, and there's another question in here that kind of we kind of answered a little bit here, but I thought I'd point it out. I know Computer Kid is here on the Zoom meeting, but I wanted to call his question specifically. I actually relate to this one a lot because I started in technology in open source about his age. I was actually 12, and he says he's almost 14, and building the skills that and at home on just spare desktop machine. That's fantastic. So how to get high, I don't know if the question is like how to get hired, but like when I was younger, it was easier because we had all these tiny ISPs, right? We had like just here in my hometown, we had like 20 ISPs that you could get dial-up service from, and like if you had an interest in computers, and like when I was that age, I just went in and just like, hey, what can I do to help? And they're like, yeah, we'll give you like $5 an hour to run cable or stuff like that, right? So it's not so you can, back then it was I think a little easier to break in at as a teenager, and then where to spend all the time now though, but so as you do get your hands dirty, so when you do go in and go for a job when you're going into college and get a tech, want to get a tech job, like right now it's Kubernetes and an automation language. Automation languages, whether that's Ansible. I mean, of course, I'm going to plug Ansible. But
if you want a non-Red Hat solution, I'm a big fan of SaltStack as well.
Yeah, I was going to mention Salt there, and then Chef. Actually, I am a big fan of Chef. I think Chef is awesome.
Chef has been doing some amazing things lately.
Yeah, and I really think Chef is pretty cool. And of course, and container technology is not going away anytime soon, and neither is virtualization. Mm-hmm. Like if you have an opportunity to really tinker with proprietary or open source virtualization technology, do it. I mean, we're planning episodes around open source virtualization. Of course, there's ones that I've talked about. I have a video on Noah's YouTube channel, Migrate Media, for installing Overt. And then there's other open source virtualization technology as well. I mean, Proxmox is obviously one of the obvious ones, but there's also a successor to Citrix Zen Server, which is Zen NG or Zen Next Generation, which has a lot of awesome tooling. I think Zen NG is a really good solution as well. Go tinker with that stuff. And like Proxmox might be a little easier to get going. Same with Zen NG. Zen NG is very. You can just set it up on a single node. Like Overt's meant for enterprise virtualization. So that might be a little too much in that. The barrier to entry might be a little high. So you have anything else you want to add, Eric, on that? And we can go ask the room for another question.
Let's see. We actually have a couple of questions. We should back up here in a minute. Back to the certification question. But I mean, Computer Kid, you're doing everything you need to be doing. Yeah, your age. There's some employment laws and that kind of thing that come under consideration. But I mean, in the meantime, you're laying the foundation for everything you need to do. I mean, in the Destination Linux network, there is a gentleman by the name of, gosh, I just blanked on his name. I can see his face, but he's not much older than you are, and he's one of the release coordinators for Kubuntu right now, or Lubuntu with an L.
Oh, Simon.
Simon, jeez. I need to reach out and say hi to him. So I mean, you're doing all the right things. If you want to gain some practical experience while you're finishing up school, do something like Simon did and find a project who needs help in the space that you're wanting to work in, and get some real experience. And then that is something huge you can put on a resume, and a hiring manager is going to look at that and go, wow, you have the education, but you've been doing this for X number of years already. That's awesome. Yeah, I want someone like you on my team.
So as far as certifications go, like if you're not ready, like I'm noticing a question, like what's a good age to really do them? Like I would recommend against doing certifications until you're ready to get into the job market. Yeah. There's a few reasons for that. Certifications expire. Yep. So the current, like the way Red Hat exams work, I don't remember how SUSE exams work, but basically, your certification for example, RHEL 6 expired when a few months after RHEL 8 came out. So,
should I tell the room?
So you gotta go get you need to go get your certification. You'll need to go recertify. So don't waste the money. You can do practice exams. I know there are plenty of sites out there that do types, like sort of practice exams. They're not quite the same, but at least will keep it fresh.
So I found that response hilarious, because when I got hired by Red Hat last year, I've had my RHCSA on my resume for years and didn't really think much of it. And then when I got hired, I realized, oops, my RHEL 6 RHCSA has actually expired as of a few months ago. So I called up my hiring manager and was like, I swear I didn't realize it. I'm not lying. I'm more than happy to go recertify, but please don't fire me. So that was kind of embarrassing, but I don't know. Maybe it endeared me a little bit to our manager, but so in the chat, Corey asks, would CentOS be okay to use to learn the Red Hat exam? So I've got a twofold answer for you. The first is yes, sort of. Pretty much anything on the RHCSA should be okay to do on CentOS, but I do have a solution that's one step better. And if you go out to redhat.com and find or better yet, just search for Red Hat developer license, you can actually get copies of CentOS, of Ansible Tower, Satellite. You can get a certain number of licenses for and RHEL, obviously, so you can install the actual ISOs, get an actual subscription, and work on RHEL proper.
Hey, it's free, and you need a Red Hat account, just as you. But other than that, it's free for development and learning purposes.
My home lab, as I'm rebuilding it, actually still runs RHEL proper off of my developer license. Mm-hmm. There was one other one about certifications. Did we cover it?
I think we covered it. Yep.
Age limit. Yeah, definitely want to wait. So, yep. Yeah, just spin up a rel VM and practice your exam there. That's a great option.
Mm-hmm.
So on the hiring front, we did have a follow up on the discourse channel about the current. Actually, before we move on, any other questions about certifications?
Mm-hmm.
I should have done that before.
Hiring, etc. Because we do have one that's about COVID.
Yeah. So we did have a follow up to this set of questions, and that was how has COVID and the current economic and political and health atmosphere, whatever you want to call it, affected the job market hiring process. And it depends on the space that you're in, but for the most part, a lot of hiring has ground to a halt. It depends on the industry that you're in. But Brandon, maybe you've got a more ironclad description.
I have been saying no to more developers, more recruiters. Excuse me. I have been saying no to more recruiters over the last 6 months than I have in the last 3.5 years. There's a lot of hiring going on in certain spaces. Hospitality, probably not so much. But like a lot of I've been reached out to by several firms that are doing like managed services that are they're interesting, but not anything I want to do. But they're like as I come across them, I've gotten a few that were pretty interesting, and I just was like, you know what, I don't want it, but maybe someone in my little community has. So I've been posting those jobs on Discord.
That's a great point.
Discourse forum.
That's a great point. The DLN Discourse actually does have a job posting section. And if you can't find that, just reach out to us and we can track it down for you. But folks from all over the community, all over the globe have been posting job opportunities there. I just find it interesting that you've been getting approached. Because I've heard maybe one or two in the past 9 months.
Yeah, it's been like some of it's been LinkedIn spam, obviously, but some of it's been like legit, like, oh, okay, but I'm good, thank you. So, it's not
always a great feeling when you're happy at your job and just go, you know what? No, that doesn't even sound good. No, I'm good, thanks.
Yeah. It's so that's been interesting. But
people just love you more than they love me.
Maybe
that's depressing.
That's entirely possible. I am more lovable.
Ouch.
I'm just kidding. What I've noticed for sure though is definitely like hospitality is not doing a lot right now. That's just given people aren't traveling. But otherwise, I think many other industries are just moving forward, just dealing with a new normal. So.
Apologize for the delays in between questions, but
sorry.
I'm managing like 3 or 4 different chats and trying to update our show notes so I can make sure everybody's question gets hit on. So before we switch gears a little bit, wanted to ask the room again, do we have any other questions on certification, education, careers, or hiring? Because I know that's a huge area, and it's been something we've gotten a lot of feedback on. I think to date, our most popular episode was the one we did on tech and careers.
Yeah, actually, there's one more.
I can go if you like.
Go for it.
It's a little a little related. So I want to make software freedom a full-time job. I'm passionate about software engineering and system administration, but I don't have certifications. I was wondering, in your opinions, what are the best companies for doing that the most? Where up, and what is the best approach to that?
So first off, Ulfnick, thank you so much for that question, and but more personally, thank you so much for everything you're doing at DLN. You've helped us promote this event. You're all over the discourse. You're all over the chats. So thank you very much for everything you're doing. Oh, and for those of you that don't know, Ulfnick is kind of project managing DLN, the DLN sponsored quality control platform. So
Nice.
For those of you that don't know what that is, if you're looking to gain some experience, this is a great place to go. So what? It's not really a DLN project. DLN's just kind of sponsoring it, but there's a huge need in open source and IT to be able to build a feature and have it tested. Probably the easiest, and we'll get back to your question, Ulfnick, I promise. Probably the easiest example I can think of to share is, so you're a developer, you're working on this feature for high DPI. But the problem is, due to budgets or whatever the case may be, you don't have a high DPI monitor to test on. So what this quality control project is designed to do is for it to be an opt-in for enthusiasts like all of us to make our hardware and our time available to these developers to say, hey, I just wrote this new feature for a high DPI monitor, so let me go out to this quality control platform and do a poll for all the people that have registered that have high DPI monitors, and I can reach out to them via email or whatever the case may be to have them test this new feature. I can push them a package, have them test it, file bug reports, get back to me. So if you're looking for a place to contribute, Ulfnick is the project manager for this, and it's awesome. There's meetings every Saturday, but anyway, I'll save that for another day. But back to Ulfnick's question here, which was actually next on our list. So perfect timing. So I wanted to ask a little bit. So when you say software freedom is a full-time job, are you saying you want to work in open source, or are you more interested on, say, the legal side?
More so in development. I respect that. There's only so far making everything free, making everything open source can get you in terms of allowing you to eat, let's say. So
yep.
I'm thinking that, the path is really going to be, you're going to have your job, which hopefully, preferably, dream world is going to be something where you're producing software everybody gets to use. Maybe there's an enterprise version, but it follows the principles of software freedom. And then you have your outside of work time, and then you can work on completely free projects. So I figure that path is going to look like working for a company like Ubuntu or GitLab or Red Hat. I know the players, generally speaking, in the FOSS world, but I don't know quite, where is the best places to go for seeking a career, a full-time job in that respect.
Brandon, you look like you had a few ideas.
Well, I've always suggested building your portfolio. I mean, I think that's really important. Like whether if you have a GitHub or GitLab portfolio, like through contributions. I mean, it's not a guarantee. And I actually think it's not as important as it used. It's becoming more important more recently. I've seen more people get hired simply because of their GitHub profile. Like they have tons of projects that they've done pull requests against or merge requests in GitLab. They're actually participating in a specific community. and but participating in a community like that is sponsored by a large entity, whether that be Red Hat, Canonical, or SUSE, is not sadly it's still not a guarantee, but it does get you visibility and increases your chances of landing a development position in those at a open source focused organization. I mean, that at least that's my perspective on it.
All right. Do you have any recommended certifications or avenues to pursue in that respect, education and so
on? I mean, from a development standpoint, it may not necessarily be a certification, but the language of the cloud has been trending towards Go. Kubernetes is written in Go. The vast majority of the surrounding ecosystem is written in Go, for better or for worse. But that's right. I like Go personally, but some people don't. But it's a
no-go for Rust, huh?
Well, like Rust is interesting, but it's I have, like, if you actually go look at what's being used in enterprise workload, to develop enterprise workloads, or software, right now at the moment it is Go. But a few years ago it was Python. I mean, Ansible was written in Python, and before that, a lot of tools were written in Ruby. So it keeps changing and evolving. So there's not one technology to really land on, but right now, at least the current trend is Go. Tomorrow it could be Rust, or it could be C for web. So,
oh gosh.
All right.
So did we talk around it, or does that kind of address your question?
Yeah, well, that'll do. I mean, it's a never-ending quest, and there's no one answer. So, yeah, I really appreciate it. And just want to say also, love the show. I love what you guys are doing. And, as much as I can help you guys get it done, happy to do it. So.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
I definitely appreciate that and all you're doing. In fact, I mean, the way you're positioned within the community is going to do, it's just going to help you get farther in your career. Like you said, there's kind of the two jobs of, this is my day job that I get paid for, and this is my other job that I don't get paid for. If I could spend my day doing the Sudo show, releasing weekly episodes, doing a video version of the show, doing tutorials and coaching sessions. If I could do everything I'm doing with DLN, if I could do that and get paid, then it would mean I wouldn't have to hold down a day job. But but it's working at places like Red Hat and GitLab that have helped me build my professional network to the point where I can actually do this and have some success. Because I mean, no one's ever heard of it, but there was going to be an IT guy podcast. I recorded a couple of test episodes, but I didn't have anywhere to launch it. So, it was never a thing. I think I still have those episodes on my YouTube channel somewhere, but you kind of have to have both, and it's finding a good balance between the two. And I think the two conversations kind of tie themselves together, that if you are if you're working in the industry and then you're volunteering, you got to make sure that those two worlds are kind of aware of each other. So putting down the work that you're doing with DLN on your resume is going to be a huge boon to your professional life and vice versa.
Awesome. And if I just extend that, if anybody else becomes involved, I mean, we just got Shaderoid in, who is incredible in SecOps, and I can make sure that I boost the things that you do for, any kind of DLN open source initiative, and I can help get your name out too. So just extending that to anybody listening, that's one way. There's plenty of ways to do it, but as far as you're involved, I will be your cheerleader. And if you're looking to get a job, you can give them my email, and I'll speak up for you.
And see, that's what's beautiful about this whole thing is just because I'm Brandon and I are the ones with the microphones, doesn't mean that this show's about us. I mean, for me, the reason why I got into sales and the reason why I host a podcast is because I'm not a developer, and I don't really want to be a systems administrator anymore. So instead of being the one behind the keyboard, but instead of being the one writing the code or building the servers, I'm here because I get excited, and I feel like I speak somewhat proficiently, as proficiently as you can with English, but this is what I do. So if you have a project, or if you have something that you want promoted, that's the platform that I'm trying to build is, hey, we have this open source project. It could use some love. It could use some attention. Let's talk to the guys over the Sudo show, because this is something that I'm passionate about.
So we have a kind of a follow-up question. Do we have a good example of a GitHub profile? So I do have one. It's not mine. Mine is terrible, to be perfectly frank. But I'll put a link to one in the show notes. I like this one because it really just shows, okay, this is how many stars I have on my projects. These are the amount of commits, and I think you can view his README, the code for his README, so you can get an idea. And like most used languages, so it tells a prospective employer that goes and looks at your profile what languages you actually write in. So that's how we built his profile, and I think that's pretty neat. So that's in chat, and I'll make sure that's in the show notes as well.
Let's see, I know we've had a lot of traffic in chat here. Let me back up here, see if. Okay, let the host ask the audience a question real quick while I'm kind of skimming through what I missed. Is this, we're about halfway through. We had some technical issues at the top of the hour, but is this helpful? Is this something we should do more often? And then I actually have a follow-up to my own question.
I'm loving it.
All right.
Let's see. Okay, so we got a GitHub profile in chat. You're not copying, you're forking.
Yeah.
There's a difference. Actually, I think that ended up in one of our episodes. I think I made some wisecrack about that.
And DevOps is a safe word.
That's not public yet.
I don't care.
So because you all are here and because we're not streaming this, I will share that we're planning to release as an extra, probably around the holidays, a bloopers episode, and you'll get to see the hours and hours of editing I do after we do a recording session like this. So, yeah, it's some of our outtakes are ridiculous, and some of it might end up on a shirt. Who knows? Okay, so here's a couple of questions that I know Brandon has been itching to cover, so I'll go ahead and read this off for you. So G in Discourse, it's not his username, but I'm not going to try and spell it out. But G over in Discourse actually posted a question about where do you purchase servers and hardware for your home lab? So Brandon, you want to field that first?
Yeah, so I don't buy like Dell and Supermicro Direct for my stuff. All I care about right away is doesn't have IPMI, and these days, can I just use an AMD with an AM4 socket? So I'm actually rebuilding my lab right now, and ASRock actually makes a board that does that has IPMI, and even better, has an AM4 socket, so I can use any Ryzen CPU I want, and it has PCI 4, so I can do some fun things with that, like with whether if that's graphics or just putting in like a 25 gig networking. That's part of the plan anyway. But I kind of build my own because even with buying secondhand like Dell or Supermicro hardware, it's still expensive. Not expensive as in like the initial cost. It's expensive to run. I don't want to run an enterprise class server in my lab, just simply because of the power and cooling requirements. Like if I can get away with doing passive cooling, I do it because I don't want the noise. But right now everything is active cooled. So I just hop on Newegg and find boards that support that stuff, and I just keep watching that. I mean, Newegg and Amazon and Tiger Direct is really where I get all my stuff, and it's all pretty much just custom builds. I don't buy anything off the shelf.
So in the past, I've used a company called ServerMonkey. They do ServerMonkey, the server store out of Texas, in the United States. Companies like this they're the ones that go in when companies that do buy direct from Dell or HP, when all of those go off lease and they're 3 or 4 years old, companies like ServerMonkey are the ones that buy up that hardware and refurb and resell. So I've bought a few Dell servers off of ServerMonkey, mostly because the name's hilarious. But I had a good experience with ServerMonkey. If you want like production quality hardware that's a few years old in good shape, but is similar to what you'd see in the data center itself. So DR posted in the chat that his home server is basically an old workstation, i7, 32 gigs of RAM. That literally was how I started my home lab. I built a desktop, and so I just bought double of everything with the exception of the graphics card. And so one was a headless server that I installed CentOS 6 on, and the other ended up becoming my workstation. It was a custom build, and that server worked great for me for years. Production stuff ran in containers on the host OS, and then anything I was playing with ran in VMs. So I mean, it's a great way, and you spend less than $1,000, and you've got a really decent server to run, like DR suggested, Plex and Nextcloud and Minecraft and things like that. So that's a perfect place to start. You don't. Granted, Brandon's in my use case is a little bit different. But
you don't need to be like me. I have so much gear. I mean, no one, unless you're doing a lot of development work, no one needs. Or running a business. Really, I don't need this hardware. I do it to tinker, keep my skills sharp.
Well, and you never know when the lab environment's going to go down at work, and then at least you've got that as a backup for demos and workshops.
That's true. That's what I use it for too.
A number of times.
That's what I use it for as well.
So we'll. I wanted to follow this rabbit trail real quick, but I've got a couple of follow-up questions for you, Brandon. But Corey posted in chat if he wanted to make a production studio at home, if we'd suggest egg cartons. That's a really, really easy, cheap solution. Not as cheap, but fairly decent is like what I've got here. I've got foam panels that I bought off of Amazon. And if you didn't notice, they match the color scheme of the show. added bonus. But there you get like 12 or 24 of them for 20 some odd dollars. It's stupid cheap, and I just mounted those to the wall using command strips. They work fairly well. My big issue is there's a window right in front of my desk, so the sound isn't as clean as I'd like. But if you're looking to go on the cheap, egg cartons. If you don't want to look at egg cartons, you can always do egg cartons and like spray paint, or buy these foam panels off of Amazon. They're fairly cheap. They work really, really well. I've been in a number of different environments, and these just help kind of cut down on that sound.
Yep.
Yeah. Ulfnick has a good suggestion in chat about wrapping towels around a picture frame. That does the same type of job. Or if you're like Brandon, you just buy a very, very good microphone and shut off your Nook that the fan isn't running correctly on.
Yep. And actually, this mic was not that expensive. This was $50 off mono price. And if anyone knows, and as Eric knows, I am addicted to mono price.
Yeah, we've talked about that. Actually, we need to hold some kind of an intervention for you, or either that, or see if Hardware Addicts has a position open for you on their show. Because you got to tell me, Brandon, how many tablets do you have right now?
Okay, so I have my
phones.
I have my Pine phone. Oh, that's upside down. My Pine phone. iPad.
Runs out. You have a Pine phone.
iPhone. MacBook. Here. ThinkPad Helix 2 running Fedora. Let's see. Dell XPS 12. It's a tablet.
I had one of those.
Computer.
I really liked it.
And then, let's see. Another ThinkPad tablet. This one's a ThinkPad 10 Gen 2. My current favorite little tablet running Fedora. This is an HP Pro Tablet 608 Gen 1. So only Gen they did. Let's see, what else? Yeah, I have I think I counted it earlier. I think it was 12. I have 2 more devices on the way. The Cobol Helios 64 should be here any day. And the Pine Tab, I just got the shipping notification for that as well. So that puts me at 14. I need one more to round it up to 15. So I'll figure that out.
So I give you a hard time when we record about all your devices. Oh gosh.
Forgot about this guy. My sticker covered XPS 15. I almost forgot.
So that was just my question, because I tease you a lot on the show, and folks that listen in may not realize that just the extent of your hardware addiction. But the question that we actually got in chat a day or so ago was, how well does Linux perform on a tablet?
So all those are running Fedora Workstation. The ThinkPad 10 Gen 2 and the HP both only have 4 gigabytes of RAM. Sorry, I'm answering a question in chat too. But the GNOME is shockingly running great, given it's sometimes it's can be a hog, CPU wise, mostly, not necessarily memory wise. But yeah, I've been using them to great success. The ThinkPads I kind of use them as a hard phones, essentially, because I run basically all my meetings off of those tablets, especially the ThinkPad 10. So, and yeah, they run great. I wish the on-screen keyboard was a little better, but I do have external keyboards for them. So it's actually on the Pine phone. I'm running Mobian, which is a Debian-based distribution, which is using Phosh. And what I'm really liking about it is actually the up-to-date keyboard. And if that can get into upstream GNOME, that would be fantastic, because the keyboard, at least on Mobian, is fantastic. On-screen keyboard.
So we had a couple of other questions similar along the same vein. Do you have a preferred keyboard, either for your desktop or for travel?
So my preferred laptop keyboard is basically a ThinkPad keyboard. I even have an external ThinkPad keyboard. I use that. But I also, when I have a standing desk, and when I'm standing, it's actually more comfortable for me to use this. Don't kill me, people. It's a Microsoft product. But I do like the Microsoft Natural Keyboard.
Is that the one with the ergonomic? I guess that kind of.
You can get it with an ergonomic mouse, but I don't like the mouse. I don't
not the
like
mouse,
their mouse.
The keyboard itself.
Yeah, this is an ergonomic keyboard. And then for
that's something I haven't had for a while. I kind of miss having an ergonomic keyboard. It's much more
as far as
type on.
Yeah, and as far as mice, I use a Logitech trackball mouse, and I have for travel, I actually have this little ThinkPad mouse. It turns into a presentation remote, but otherwise it's a mouse. It's not very comfortable, but for long use, but for travel, it's great. When I was traveling a lot, I loved it for travel. Because it's small, fits in the bag, doesn't take up a lot of room. And I do have it's not readily available, a gaming mouse for when I do game. So it's the Logitech wireless mouse with their lightning. I think they call it lightning technology.
Yeah, I think so. But I mean, I've got a Logitech G910 mechanical keyboard, and just a G502 Hero. It's a wired gaming mouse from Logitech as well. I like that I can customize the color scheme, and I actually control that via Ansible. Just fun fact. And DR in the chat thinks that Brandon has a ThinkPad obsession. Let me answer that and just say you have no idea.
I have a new X1 coming too, of course, with Fedora pre-installed.
Of course. So. Let's see. Okay, so here's a couple more workflow type questions. So when you're using Git, we talked about GitHub and GitLab a little bit. So when you're using Git, do you prefer CLI or the GUI?
Oh, okay. So it depends. If I am, so my preferred editor is Visual Studio Code these days. I really like Visual Studio Code. If I'm in Visual Studio Code, I'll use the built-in Git capability in the UI. It's there. I'll just use it. Just makes it easier. But I do still do a lot of stuff like on the command line. I actually do prefer Git on the command line. But if it's available and it just is like, it's right there, just hit commit and go. I mean, it's not that, it just makes it, Visual Studio makes it super easy. But it's no preference overall, but I live in the command line. Almost everything I do is in the command line. Email, I Do use an email client that is all in CLI. I actually package it for Fedora on my Copper repo. It's not in the official repo.
Yeah, and I kind of go back and forth on that one myself. When I was at GitLab, I pretty much exclusively used Git through the GitLab UI, through the web interface, just because all of my work was there. So it was easy just to make code changes in the online editor and submitting that way. When I'm writing a bunch of Ansible playbooks, I'm usually using VS Code because I can have my editor, I can have a command line down at the bottom. So a lot of times I'll just do my Git commits there. But if I'm server side, if I'm working on a headless system, then I'd probably default to the CLI just because it's quick and convenient. When you're under pressure, when you've got a tight deadline, it becomes a matter of how can I get this done with the fewest number of clicks and commands. So it depends on your workflow. The follow up to that question was, do you have one that you prefer or recommend? In my opinion, use what works for you. But my recommendation would be, if you're new to Git, if you're using Git, if you're new to, let me try that again. If you're new to Git, use the command line so you can learn the process. See what the different commands are. See how it interacts. How your Git repo takes on information and displays information, because then when you go to a GUI, a lot of that is abstracted behind the UI. Mm-hmm. So if something were to go wrong and you've never used the command line, it's going to be a lot harder to troubleshoot than if you realize, oh, it just broke down here. Maybe it's a bug in the Git plugin or something of VS Code. So you knew that, oh, hey, it broke at this step. So I can just go to the command line, run these two commands, and I'm back up and running. So I'd start with command line, and then when you feel comfortable, move over to UI.
If you're if you're in the GitHub ecosystem, GitHub Desktop is a great tool. I think it's great. I use GitHub a lot. That's just where all the projects I work on are at. But if you GitHub Desktop is a great tool. It's on Linux, it's on Windows, it's on Mac. So it's a decent cross-platform application.
So along the same lines, kind of the whole workflow line of questions, do you have a favorite proprietary software, Brandon, either for work or personal? We both know what my answer is going to be.
My answer is no. I probably the only piece of proprietary software I use is, I do have, I guess it's on any platform. I do, on my desktop, I don't use any proprietary software. But on other platforms, my favorite email client on the phone, and it was probably because it was not developed by Microsoft originally, and that's Microsoft Outlook. Microsoft Outlook was not on iPhone, was not developed by Microsoft originally. They acquired the company.
And just like that, all of our listeners just left, and all of our reviews went from 5 stars to 1. Thanks, Brandon.
It's a good email client. I'm not going to apologize for that. Does the job. It does the job, and it works great but it also goes with my workflow. I mean, like if on my on my desktop for work email, I use Evolution, which is essentially a Microsoft Outlook clone. So it kind of goes with my workflow. If there was another email client I could easily access Gmail on, because that's, we use G Suite. At work, I would definitely use something else that had that level of integration between mail and calendar. So that's a very important thing for me, is that integration between mail and calendar.
So over in our Matrix room, we had a question from Vegas Josh. He says, "I know from the show that you all love all."
Hold on,
all
you
things...
didn't answer the question. You didn't answer the.
Oh no, I didn't. But thankfully, I've answered this before, so it won't come as a surprise to anyone. But I am obsessed with Todoist. Todoist, IST. I can't live without it. I have all of my projects, my reading list, my personal work, all of it's in Todoist, and I schedule every day through it. It's awesome. If you haven't heard of it, it's kind of an advanced project manager and advanced to-do list manager, kind of all in one. Sometimes to-dos and project management are two separate pieces, but Todoist has kind of blended those together. They've got a desktop app, they've got web interface, they've got iPad, iPhone, mobile apps, so it's everywhere. So if there's an email that I need to respond to in a few days, I can forward it to my Todoist. If there's some articles I've been wanting to read, I can forward those to Todoist and read them later. I mean, I can brain dump into Todoist, and we're actually going to talk about this in an upcoming episode of the show, in the productivity corner, because one of the ways that I can work my day job and do this and have a family is that I make sure that that everything's planned out. I make sure I empty out my email inbox. I make sure to keep my calendar up to date, and I just work down the list so that I know that I'm always up to date on everything. I typically don't miss an email, and if it's something that needs to get done, I put it into Todoist. I schedule it out, and I can track all of that. So, I have a little bit of an obsession with Todoist.
Do you use multiple accounts or profiles with Todoist for tracking work and personal to keep them separated?
No, I don't. So for years, I'll work weird hours, especially now that I have kids. So if in the middle of the day the kids are revved up and they want to go to the park or something, I can step away from work. So I don't really have a set work schedule. I kind of have office hours, if you will, where my team knows that they can get a hold of me. But for the most part, I keep it all combined. So if I need to pay a cell phone bill one day, and I also need to write that presentation for a customer that I'm presenting to next week or something, I got it all there in one space so I can see what's going on. It gives me a one-stop place to look for all the work that I need to get done, whether that's work or personal or sudoshow. Although I do have separate projects, but it's all under one profile.
Right. So you go to the same app to see what you have to do. All right.
Same app, different projects. So it definitely helps.
I could see that. I always try to keep my work and personal really separate, but then it sometimes makes it hard to, I don't know, get those little victories in the middle of the day.
And it depends. I was going to say I go back and forth on this, but I really don't. I prefer email apps where I can see all of my email in one place. I prefer having my work and personal calendars together. That way I have a full view of everything that I need to get done. Whether that's a kid's doctor's appointment and a customer call, and maybe Brandon and I are recording Sudoshow that evening. I mean, that's 3 different aspects of my life. I don't want to have to go to 3 different places to see that.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't think it was a question, but like go-to apps. I do use there is a proprietary version of it. It's open core, but this one was forked and gained all the functionality. But the app was called Franz, F-A-R-A-N-Z. And there's a fork of it called Ferdi, F-E-R-D-I. it's an Electron app, so it allows you to kind of like aggregate all your different cloud-based things like Gmail, Twitter, Slack. That's been I actually really like Verdi for that. But there's also another one that's like kind of that aggregation type solution. It's built on top of GNOME Web. I really like, called what was it called? I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head. Yeah, Tangram. Tangram.
So Corey put a question on the chat that he's trying to start a podcast, and is Fireside worth it? Yes, and yes. The Sudo show is hosted on Fireside. That's how we get it out to Spotify, Apple, Google, Stitcher. I think. Inside Look, Amazon Music is now hosting podcasts. Sudo show is on there. It's there to be subscribed to. So it's really nice to be able to integrate all of those different platforms into one place. So every 2 weeks I'm in YouTube and I'm in Fireside, and those are the only two places I have to go to publish out to everything. So like LBR, the Sudo show also publishes to LBRY, but I can actually use automation into LBRY to basically like clone our YouTube post. So between Fireside and YouTube, I can pretty much get our show everywhere that it needs to be. But the only part I haven't really automated yet is the discourse thread, where people could go in to specific episodes and ask questions. But Fireside is definitely worth it, especially when it comes to like the metrics, because I only have, again, two places to go: YouTube and Fireside to get the metrics. Like I was just in there today updating the AMA link and saw that we're just a few downloads shy of 13,000 views on Fireside. So all of our audio podcast listeners, we're up around 13,000 views plus whatever YouTube is. So Fireside definitely worth it. I cannot believe how cheap Fireside is for the amount of functionality that you get.
Great value indeed. Continuing on the same vein, with kind of like but going back into FOSS, but I'll just read this off from Vegas Josh and from our Matrix room. I know from the show that you love all things open source for the enterprise, but what Linux and FOSS stuff do you geek out personally in everyday life? Is there any tech or software that you're really into that doesn't necessarily tie to enterprise? That's a really good question. Eric, do you want to take that first, and I'll answer that next?
Oh man, way to throw me under the bus on that. I was just trying to think about it.
If you want me to go first, I will.
If you got an answer ready, go for it.
So, Home Assistant is probably what I've been most interested in at home, and tinkering with that, like in terms of like I've kind of, I'm using that as essentially a barrier between all my devices in my house that it supports that don't communicate to the internet. I'm very, very adamant. I don't want a light switch to be on the public internet or any way communicating to the internet. There's no reason for it. So I have that. Home Assistant is essentially acting as that barrier. And then I have Home Assistant like talking to things like HomeKit, like Apple HomeKit, so I can do all the stuff on my iPhone. So I and HomeKit's basically become a fantastic standard, and I'm not planning on switching from that. What's great about Home Assistant is it'll expose things as HomeKit devices, even if they don't do HomeKit natively. And I think that's been really cool. But what's great, if I decide not to use my setup the reason why I've set it up this way using Home Assistant is basically that layer between my device, as the home automation layer. I decide I don't want to use HomeKit anymore. I don't need to use HomeKit anymore. So it's been fantastic. Of course, I do have other, and like, even if, or if it does communicate using HomeKit, like the device uses HomeKit itself, it can also translate it to other things. So if I wanted to bring in a spy device, like I don't know, an Amazon Echo or whatever into my home, I can, and still rip it out because it's communicating straight to Home Assistant, not to the device. So that's been my passion project, is tinkering with home automation.
And I'm just taking every piece of information I can get out of Brandon between now and next year, or maybe early 2022, because my family and I are thinking about buying some land and building a house. So I'm letting Brandon make all the mistakes in his lab before I build. I think for me, I don't know if there's anything specific that I'm excited about right now. I'm kind of I'm in a phase right now where I'm using things that I'm pitching at work at home. So Red Hat is really pushing Podman right now for containerization. So something a step between running it on bare metal or virtualized versus setting up Kubernetes or OpenShift here at home. So one of the things I've been really focusing on is how can I use the tools I'm selling at work at home? And Podman's a great example. Like right now, I've got Minecraft and Nextcloud. I have in one of my other tabs, I have the Matrix documentation open, and I keep telling myself that I don't have time or energy to set up my own Matrix instance, but it'll probably happen here soon. But so I think right now I'm kind of in this stage of trying to consolidate and automate what I have. That way, when I'm ready, when I come across that next project, when I find something else that I'm really excited about, I can just say, "Hey, I have automation that does about 80% of this. I'll write the other 20, and then look, I have this Ansible playbook that runs, and now I've got a Jellyfin server or something here at home." So that's kind of where I'm at. Of course, we moved into our new condo, and everything else has been kind of crazy. So I haven't really had some downtime lately to find that next project I'm going to obsess over.
Mm-hmm.
But it won't be long. So Corey asks, what are the differences between Kdenlive and OpenShot? And I will tell you right now, I am not qualified to answer that question for you.
Neither am I.
I think OpenShot though is more for photography, I think. But I do use Kdenlive for some of the video editing that I do. It's very rare and it's painful, but I do use Kdenlive for videos. I think. Don't quote me on that.
I typically use Kdenlive, but I for editing video, I've had decent success with it so far. But I don't do a lot of video. I'm starting to get into it more because of the tutorial series I'm working on. So yeah, we'll see more of that soon, and I'll probably do a review on how much I hate video editing soon. So
yeah, we'll have a therapy episode for that. So since we're on, I'm trying to think which of these would be the easier to answer. I want to make sure we cover them both. So stepping away from Foss for a second. Toad, who's still with us, actually asked in Discord, so Brandon, do you have a bus factor plan for your personal digital assets? So does your wife have access to your password vault? Does she know what to do with all those servers should you get hit by the proverbial bus? What's that plan look like for you?
Well, if that does happen, what will immediately happen is my wife will, after a couple of weeks of grieving, will probably just rip out all my servers and throw them in the trash can. Because she'll be like, I don't know what the heck this is doing, and make it go away. But from a password perspective, all seriousness, so I'm not saying this because they're a sponsor of Sudo show, but we use Bitwarden for password management with the family plan. And if anything would have happened to me or her, we have access to each other's passwords, all of them. We have if she needs to get into my email, she can get into my email. I have now 3 email accounts that get used, but like the one that actually matters, she has access to that. And she has access to the other 2 as well, but so she can get into our bank accounts, reset any passwords if needed or whatever. She has complete access to everything. And in terms of like documents and things like that, I have a setup where all my data is backed up. I take the time to do this about once a month, and all the data that is relevant for our house, for anything, any life documents, I have a hard disk that I keep in a safety deposit box, and if anything were to happen to me, and she, for whatever reason, can't get access to the data through the cloud services that we're using, all that data is in a safety deposit box on a hard drive. And it's not a lot of data, but I make sure that it's done regularly.
So that's a really good point. And little bit of personal information about myself. I just went through a big custody battle not too long ago, and that just wrapped up. So admittedly, this is something I'm on the front end of rethinking, more than just, hey, this is the password to my password vault. Good luck, to actually having a written plan. So that's something I'm actually thinking about and planning for. And since that's something that we don't like to think a lot about, but need to. I mean, it's really important that kind of thing is in place. I need to make sure that my significant other and my kids are provided for should anything happen to me. But maybe we'll create some content around that as we go forward.
Yeah, I think this is really important as well. And this is on that hard drive and also physical. I also have printed off our will. It's all in that same safety deposit box. But I also, in that safety deposit box, I printed off several critical things, like several critical passwords. They're in that safety deposit box. No one's going to get it, as well as a YubiKey. So I use YubiKeys everywhere that I can. And I have a spare, that YubiKey is enrolled to authenticate into anything we need to. So that supports that. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff there, as well. I'll probably switch those paper passwords that printed to some sort of hardware device. I haven't really made up my mind on that, but that's something with encryption. So it's not like, oh, look, someone's safety deposit box. What's this? So in that unlikely event, but still need to think about that. But
so we've got one more question that we haven't covered yet. But first off, I wanted to open it up to the room, to the chat. But I also wanted to ask all of you a question, something that Brandon and I were just talking about this morning. we were discussing during a meeting that he and I had to prep for today of, if this goes well, is this something we want to do for our episodes? So we'd actually talked about doing similar to Destination Linux and the Ask Noah show of having a Jitsi room or featuring the Matrix chat and opening up our recording sessions to the audience. Is that something that you all would find valuable or enjoyable? I know Brandon and I were talking back and forth about a lot of these questions, but just having the chat open and, something that Brandon might have triggered a question in somebody's mind that we could then cover live on air as we're recording, and then
go off script.
And go off script. And probably my favorite part about Destination Linux and the Ask Noah show is kind of the after hours hangout. Hang out for 30 minutes, chat and share some ideas, because just going through the last 2 hours, I can think of 3 or 4 episodes that we could do for the show itself. So if we opened up our recording process to all of you, is that something that folks would be interested in?
I'm game for it.
Cool.
Yeah, and Corey, if you're not already, based on some of your questions, I would definitely check out the Ask Noah show and call in because production, open source, small business, a lot of the questions that you've had, Noah could answer in his sleep. He is a wizard when it comes to open source and multimedia and that kind of thing. So definitely check out the Ask Noah show and call in on Tuesday nights, ask him your questions. He could do a much better job of answering some of these than Brandon and I could. Yeah. So we got a few minutes left and want to be respectful of everyone's time, but also we have one last question that we should cover. And about $10 in our discourse asked, how would you migrate a business or school to open source? And I think that's a great question.
Very good question. So actually, we're going to be doing an episode kind of on this, not necessarily the whole infrastructure, but let me kind of start. But on the back end services, quite frankly, are probably the easiest to migrate to open source software. If you're starting from scratch, obviously just do it. But migrating enterprise resource management platforms, ERP, that moving that to an open source platform is easy. CRM, moving that. Moving the data is hard, but implementing them is easy, and getting people to adopt them is not forklift. Because it's all web-based, regardless of platform. Now moving your end users to open source, that's where things get really hard, in my opinion. Moving, because you have process, everyone's using Microsoft Office or Google Docs, or you'll pry Outlook out of my cold dead hands kind of thing.
It's just on mobile.
On Windows or on Mac, right? And but the way we did this, my first job 15 years ago, was on every Windows machine we pushed out. At the time, it was OpenOffice 1.0, which was a giant heaping pile of garbage. Because it didn't do anything like anything that end users needed to do. It didn't work. Pivot tables in OpenOffice Calc, forget it. Until OpenOffice 2, you really couldn't do anything useful. So thankfully that's not much of a problem. LibreOffice 7 has awesome support for Microsoft Office formats. So today it's a lot easier to move off of Microsoft Office to LibreOffice than it used to be. Way easier. And then from like we were lucky. I mean, we were using we weren't using Exchange. We were using GroupWise, and that had a multi platform client, so it didn't matter. It was the same on Mac, Linux. So email was easy to move all the end users on. But it's mostly that experience, the application, your enterprise applications, Microsoft Office, it's ubiquitous throughout the enterprise, period, end of story. And if you want to move off of it, you need to have 100% compatibility between your, with files. And then probably the other thing I would suggest, and this is something that we did back then too, is file syncing. And back then, like Dropbox didn't exist. We used a solution called iFolder, which was open source and multi-platform, but being able to move files between end user computers, especially if they had a Windows machine and a Linux machine, because many users did have two machines, would have because they'd have a desktop and a laptop, and moving between them was much easier. But as long as you can get files from Windows and files from Linux in pretty easily, you
that's like a tradition when we're recording. Cynthia always pops in, waves, and pops out.
So that's how I would do it, is like the end user side is the hardest. It always is. And it's never going to get easy. But you can lower the barrier to entry by making it easier to move between the platforms. So, and I didn't finish that. So we put like LibreOffice, actually in the case, OpenOffice on Windows, put Firefox on Windows, because those were the tools that we were using on Linux. So that made the transition easier, making the default browser in the organization Firefox instead of Internet Explorer, making the default Office suite OpenOffice. That what just made sense. But we're actually planning a whole episode on this. I don't want to go in too much onto this. So, but that's an approach. There's more than one way to approach it, but moving an organization, small business, medium business, a school to open source is not for the faint of heart. And also, especially if you're looking at end user computing, but server side, that's why it's taken off. Server side, why open source on server side is taken off, because it's easy to move those things off to open source than end user computing.
Yeah, and my answer would be very similar. Do the back end stuff that your end users aren't going to see, and then start switching over your desktop applications. Because I mean, desktop Linux has come so far in the past 3 or 4 years that when you factor in how easy it is to use GNOME, or how much you can customize either GNOME or Plasma to look like Windows or to behave like Windows. If someone's already used to using LibreOffice and Firefox, and you change their desktop, change the way it looks, or change the way that the quote start menu behaves, it's going to be a whole lot easier, because you don't want to start a riot with your end users by switching everything overnight.
Mm-hmm. Looks like we got another question in chat. Open source software on taxes. Is that, Corey, is that really what you're asking, is like taxes and open source, like doing taxes?
Yeah. My client's been asking me, how do I write things out and all that. One of them had their tax person actually come to me couple months ago or something like that and asked me all these 1,000 questions. And I couldn't answer them. I said, all I know, they're open source. And I'm not paying for it, or a lot of it, but I'm helping with the community. So I don't know how to label stuff in that nature.
That's good. I don't know.
I can tell you again who to ask. I know exactly who.
That one I don't know. I'm not a tax guy.
Yeah.
But like if you're looking like for specific software, like from all the software I used to use for managing finances for my old business that I obviously don't run anymore doesn't exist anymore. I don't know if what anyone else uses on that, but yeah, I couldn't answer that. I'm not a tax guy.
Yeah.
There's GNU Cache, but that's the furthest I know on that.
Is that that's more of an open source quick and
personal
tax oriented,
like personal finance. I mean, what was it called? Hold on. I'm going to look it up really quick. But I think we're going to be wrapping up here in just a moment. But I wanted to just see if it's still here and being. There it is. Let's see if it's still being developed. Yes, System 76 is still managing this project. I just don't know how many commits. Let me see the frequency before I recommend it. Doesn't look like there's been a lot of work on it in the last few months, according to GitHub Insights. It's called Beans Books. System 76. It's github.com/system76/Beans Books. I'll put that in chat.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Beans Books this was probably this is probably like the best open source drop-in replacement for QuickBooks that I'm aware of. But as far as I don't know, like the most recent commit was 2 months ago. But a lot of this hasn't been updated in 5 years. So just keep that in mind. Let me go look at it's been.
Yeah, so it's no longer maintained.
I don't know how well it's being maintained. So that's just something to keep in the back of your head if you do decide to go with it.
Computer Kid posted in Matrix that Beans Book is available as is and will no longer be maintained.
Yeah. So I don't. Yeah, there might be other things out there.
Yeah, someone might have forked it.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I know at one time Noah was using it, but because he mentioned it on one of the shows, but I don't know what he's doing now. So,
okay, thanks. No, I'm just sick and tired of using QuickBooks, but everybody's been asking me what does QuickBooks or any of the other software labels like the distro itself and all that, and I have no idea. But how we set up QuickBooks, it's just what I buy. So I'm like, okay.
Let me see if they're still here. Hold on. Let me see if a Dempier is still out there, I'll recommend it. I haven't used it in years, so hold on.
Okay.
It's on SourceForge, so I'm not hopeful. Oh,
Wow.
It's a fork off of another solution called Compier that I used very heavily back in the day. It's a full enterprise resource management platform, which includes accounting and all that. Yeah, Compier hasn't been updated since 2016, but a Dempier has been updated recently. I don't know what the code activity looks like. Where was their last release? Yeah, not hopeful. 2017. Yeah, it's been. Yeah, I'll. That's something I'll look into a little bit. I'll go ask Noah, pun intended. But yeah, I haven't had to deal with this in so long. I haven't even thought about it. There's Ledger SMB and Open Bravo and Front Accounting. Those are all open source. I don't know how they look. This is just, I don't know how they handle how it compares to QuickBooks. Sadly, QuickBooks is just what's become ubiquitous in SMB. And as much as we all disliked it. So I used it for a little while, and then I moved to an open source solution, and then I closed my business. So I haven't had to deal with this since 2011.
So, we're a little over time, but I've got a few extra minutes. If anybody has any last minute questions.
Does Brandon ever sit down?
Yes.
No, I don't.
I assume when you're using your ThinkPad on the couch or something, you might. But...
Well, he drinks about 4 gallons of coffee a day, so he can't.
He's afraid he's going to sit on one of his many devices.
What is your coffee method of choice?
French press, actually.
Yeah.
I also like a mocha pot. So,
I used to be a security guard, so anything that's heavy and black. A lot of my friends been having me do Black Rifle coffee. It's actually really powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm out of coffee. I need, but actually, about this time of day, I switched to decaf. So I finally found a decaf that doesn't make me immediately regurgitate it. So,
Okay, so here's a question that I'm actually messing with recently. I assume you guys probably use CentOS or Fedora in the home lab, right?
Fedora.
Rel.
Yeah. Okay. So would you?
Rel. But that wasn't one of the choices, Brandon.
Okay. It's based. Okay. Anyways, what would you use for backend storage? Like, are you going to use just something plain like extended for, or would you go for the ZFS, or the Btrfs, Mergefs?
So for my virtualization environment, I use currently I'm using Gluster, and for going forward with my new hardware lab, I will be using Ceph. I have zero interest in traditional SAN storage these days. So ZFS, I have no interest in ZFS at all. So
okay. Here's one for a new user. I got a friend that's trying to do Linux right now, learn it or actually install it on a USB. He's a tech guy on the Windows side. Should I just tell him to install Ubuntu or get him on something like Linux Lite and have him on XFCE?
Fedora.
Oh, not like for Windows users. I have typically pushed Windows users towards, and actually to great success, to OpenSUSE. I've had more Windows users stick with Linux when I recommend OpenSUSE, specifically KDE, using KDE Plasma.
And there's another player you might consider, and that's Ubuntu Mate, and they even have, I guess, skins would be a good term. They have skins to make it look
skin.
like Redmond skin, so that it looks like Windows, but it's Ubuntu under the hood. So Ubuntu Mate would be a great option as well.
Yeah,
or Fedora.
Yeah. Only reason why I recommend OpenSUSE for Windows users is, especially like if they're heavy tech, like they're Windows admin, there are a ton of tools that are built into OpenSUSE that allow you to manage a Windows environment that you can get similar tools on other distros, don't get me wrong, but they're all baked into YAST and they're fantastic tools. I used to be a SUSE user. I used SUSE for years, and still the best. I still think that it's the best distro for Windows technical users.
All right. Well, with that, I think. And I've got to single someone out first. Self-hosted Pro joined about 9 minutes after the episode ended. But welcome to the Sudoshow AMA.
Thanks.
Do you have any questions, Self-hosted Pro?
Yeah. Is my mic working all right? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yep, we hear you.
Okay.
Working.
Yeah, no, I was just coming in to check it out. I haven't been on the Sudo show before. I mostly just stuck with Ask Noah. So I was a little late, but I saw you guys in the Telegram channel talking. So I figured I'd hop in and see what's up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just
well, welcome.
wrapping up. Thank you.
Thanks.
For jumping on.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll probably do this again. I think Brandon and I were talking about doing an AMA about once a quarter or so.
I have a few more minutes, Computer Kid.
I might step away for a minute, but I can stick around. But what was I saying? So we're thinking about doing AMAs about once a quarter or so. But we're also starting to think about doing our recording live, so folks can join and ask questions, and I think we'd get better content by having people that can ask questions in the chat or on the episode itself, so we can better steer our content. A lot of what we're targeting is enterprise open source. So it's a lot more, not just on the business side, but on the large business side. So it's a little bit different than Ask Noah or Destination Linux. So a lot of the career and tech questions is kind of where we're going to play. And I think helping folks be able to ask questions and influence the content would be much more beneficial than Brandon and I talking into an echo chamber. All right, Computer Kid, hit us with your file system questions.
Yeah. So I was actually, now I kind of want to know, Brandon, what I don't understand the whole what did you say, SANs file systems? What are they?
Okay.
What's the difference?
So SAN is basically just a system that serves out storage, or you can also say it's a NAS. That's a network attached system, and then a storage system is usually it's over fiber channel, like a fiber fabric. It's not over traditional network. Whereas like NAS is typically over traditional IP networking. And when you use fiber channel or iSCSI goes over traditional networking, just like NAS. But the way it gets presented is typically as a block device. And then you have NAS, which is usually what TrueNAS is. TrueNAS is NAS, so it uses traditional network IP networking. So you usually consume the storage over NFS. Whereas, and then you have SAN, that's all done over fiber, but you deal with each individual, they call them LUNs, as a normal block device. So to your system, when you attach to it, it's like you're attaching to it over a storage fabric or a network. It's going to look like a normal hard drive. Whereas like a NAS is going to be a network file system. So that's going to use NFS probably. Now, what I described earlier using Ceph is kind of like takes both approaches, but usually, first let me finish. So like a SAN is typically or a NAS is a very monolithic device. So like it's really hard to scale. You can only scale it so much. Usually it's based on how many SATA or SAS ports you have to put in drives, or if it's like a very expensive enterprise SAN or NAS, you can hang more storage off of the SAN control node. Now, Ceph is completely different. Ceph and Gluster are scalable storage. So like I can have a node, or actually you start off with 2 or 3 nodes that are pooling their storage across the network. So you have a node with like, say, you have nodes with like 3 terabytes each. So you pool that 3 terabytes, and it immediately goes. You immediately have you pool that 3 terabytes, and basically you have a RAID across your network, for lack of a better term. So like now I can say, all right, I've pooled that 3 terabytes in each box. Now I have 6 terabytes, but that third box is my redundancy. And you then go and your systems can then read or write to that network file system. In the case of Ceph, it uses CephFS for file-based, or the S3 gateway for object storage. I can get into the differences there. And then another gateway for block. So you can attach a Linux system to the Ceph block gateway. So you can consume that disk, and it gets presented to Linux as just a generic block device. It's just going to look like a hard drive. You can't do that on Windows. With Windows, you have to go through a CIFS gateway. You can't do any fun stuff.
That's just a blanket rule. You can't do fun stuff on Windows. But this whole technology, this is entirely new to me. I'm gonna have to do some reading up on this. And some people in the chat were saying this might be an episode.
It could be.
Yeah.
Could be. So I'm like really into scalable file systems. So scalable network file systems. So that's Gluster, that's Ceph. There's another one out there called LinStore that I've been really kind of tinkering at there. That's just does scalable block. And there's another one called MinIO, and that one's purely for object storage. Gluster is one of my favorites. What I like about Gluster is very, very lightweight.
And it's made by Red Hat.
Oh, we bought the company, yeah. But actually, the bigger contributor to it is not Red Hat; it's Facebook. Facebook uses Gluster very heavily. Netflix, I believe. No, it wasn't Netflix. It was Pandora. Pandora was using Gluster a lot. I believe it was Pandora. I might be wrong on that.
So I heard that Facebook was using Btrfs. So are they using them in some sort of conjunction?
So yeah, you would use it underneath, right? So Gluster is just a layer above. So typically when you install when you install Gluster, you're creating what's called bricks, and those bricks actually live on in the case of the Red Hat version, an XFS file system. You can use ZFS. You can use Btrfs instead. It doesn't matter. The underlying actual file system on the disk is different. Gluster is a layer above. So Gluster does all the replication between the different nodes that it's a part of. That the Gluster. I'm not going to say cluster with Gluster. Oh, anyway, it distributes the storage among the cluster. That's the role of Gluster, or the role of Ceph. Ceph is just taking the data and replicating across multiple nodes. And once you have those and presenting that, the underlying file system is not Ceph. The underlying file system is XFS or something else. It could be anything, quite frankly.
This almost sounds a bit like a network RAID.
It is. Yeah.
Okay.
That's in the simplest term. Yes, you could call it a network RAID.
So now I kind of want to make like RAID and then Btrfs RAID on top of that, and then Gluster RAID on top of that. So I've got triple RAID.
Well, you don't. So actually, with network file systems like Gluster and Ceph, you actually don't want to use local hardware RAID. You want to use JBOD. You want Gluster to handle the replication. You don't want the hardware replication, or you're going to run into all kinds of fun I/O issues.
Yeah, just like you wouldn't put ZFS on top of RAID.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Huh. You've just opened a whole new world to me.
You're thinking, I'm thinking like a whole level above. So like when Ceph, when you're dealing with things like Ceph, you're dealing with multiple petabytes. Like Ceph is meant for petabyte scale, not terabyte scale. And Gluster is meant for is a file, right? Like you're delivering things as a file. It's meant for it's purely meant for file.
Enterprise?
Whether if it's for an enterprise or not. I use Gluster at my house in my home lab. All my storage is built on top of Gluster. Everything, like my whole back end for my virtualization is built on Gluster. The back end for my Plex library is using Gluster. My C file instance, it's writing all its data to Gluster. So everything I do is even for small. So like I have the way my Gluster storage works is I have I'm using Pine 64 Rock Pro boards with because they have a PCI slot, so I can put in a PCI card and put two hard disks on them, and I have 10 of them. I have 10 of these nodes running in my lab, and that's where all my that's my storage backend for everything. So, and right now I have 10. Ooh, no, it's now 20 terabytes usable. And I have full redundancy. It's awesome. I love the way it works. If I need to replace a node, it's really easy to replace. I just order a new node, put it in, If I need to expand it, I just put in an additional node.
Wow.
It's not the
Very
most
cool.
affordable way of doing
Yeah.
it, but
I don't.
but
I've
it's the
got
fun
like
way.
2 terabytes, so it might not be worth it for me.
And then, but like, and I'm working on expanding, on changing it out. Like I'm earlier in the show, I talked about I'm getting a Helio 64, which is another rock board based device, but it has 5 SATA ports, so I can make that even more fun, and also reduce how many pieces of hardware I have in my lab. So I'm trying to reduce my hardware footprint right now, so I don't have as much to deal with. So I'm hoping I can replace my 10 Rock Pros with just 4 Helio 64 storage nodes. Those are running. Those Rock Pros are running CentOS 7 today. So.
I ran my home lab for a while when it was just a little baby home lab, and I was such a noob. I ran it off the base level Pine 64 board, 0 SATA ports, USB 2.0. It's great.
Hey,
but that's where I got my start.
Hey, you're at the age where I started, and I started very similar, except I had a Pentium. No, it was AMD. It was an AMD 486 DX4 100 megahertz processor, and I had more RAM than I knew what to do with. A whole 16 megabytes of RAM.
Dang, this is insane.
And a 500 megabyte hard drive.
Store all the movies.
For me, I started with actually Intel. I was running Mac, doing a lot of stuff on virtualization. Back in school, I found Linux when I first found Jupiter Broadcasting, but I was more into drama. I was trying to become a actor, but I got back into the backside of the film industry, and I thought, hey, since Microsoft and Mac kept breaking on me, I had 2 MacBooks, and the batteries just exploded on me when I was doing my film stuff of editing and everything else. And I have my own office now, but I am still trying to get me something for sound.
I started when I found Jupiter Broadcasting as well. It's like, what was it, like 2015, 2016? I started on a 32-bit Mac Mini that I got for free from a school I was working at the time.
I started on a Pi 3B Plus was my first Linux box. And then it was an AMD AMD Sempron laptop was the next machine.
Oh, guys, you're making me feel old.
Dude, you're probably...
I feel like a lot of people say that to me. It's weird.
Dude.
And I'm 24 too, so if that makes you feel older, that's
okay. Seriously, I must be the one in the middle because I graduated. Whoo! I'm almost 30.
I'm in middle school.
I just turned 36.
Go figure.
Yeah. I'm 14 as well.
Everybody's here older than me.
But 14 plus a couple of decades.
Actually, we had a DR in here too, and he said he was 15. So no.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And computer kid, like from like if you want to go learn, like that's all that. If you have like what's really cool about Gluster, if you want to go look at that, Gluster can be ran virtual, so you can run it on a virtual machine. So you can learn it without having to invest any hardware.
Yeah, that's definitely one of there's like two big topics standing in my way that I haven't really touched yet, but I definitely need to tackle, and that's virtualization and orchestration. I've I've looked at what Ansible is and a bit of playbooks, but I haven't actually done it, and I've never set up a virtual machine before.
So that's the one thing.
I started in self-hosted in the era of containers, so everything's been Docker from day one.
Oh, that's good. Docker is where it's at. I mean, I was saying this earlier. I mean, everything is container. Everything's moving to containers. Everything's moving away. It's not moving. Virtualization's still going to be around for a long time. I mean, they're like, just because of the investments. I'm sorry, I'm getting blown up on notifications.
Or that's me. My bad.
I turned it off. I turned off notifications and turned back on. But
not sorry.
So because enterprises have made so much investment in virtualization, specifically with VMware. So virtualization's not going anywhere. So learn it. That's still important. KVM is probably more important because KVM is the most widely used hypervisor on the planet. I mean, VMware has the paid market, but KVM is like that runs the Amazon cloud. That runs Google Cloud. It runs the IBM cloud. It runs Alibaba. It runs T Systems. It runs everything. Every single major public cloud in the world uses KVM. So it's very important to at least understand how it works. Because if you when you do get your first job in technology, you could very well be working on those systems, especially if Amazon and Microsoft keep gobbling everyone up. So that you'll end up be forced to work on it. So
technical debt's a great way to get a job, huh? Technical debt others.
Well, technical debt. I mean, think about with COVID, like at the beginning, like with all the systems, the unemployment systems. It ran on COBOL on IBM mainframes. So
yeah, I'm quitting, Brandon. I didn't tell you, but I'm quitting Red Hat. I want to be a COBOL programmer.
Oh, boy. Hey,
I'll work about 12 hours a week and make more than I'm making now.
No, if you even have a basic understanding of COBOL, right now you can get a job $300 an hour.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's
without
crazy.
even thinking.
I thought about learning it, but that's not where my interest lies in coding. It's all about that
operations
sysadmin.
has more fun.
For me, I may start learning COBOL now. I've been thinking about learning Rails, but I've been trying to learn WordPress. That's one of my company's biggest assets right now. I do website designs alongside with everything else.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to be working in technology too, you're going to want to learn Python, especially like I work in DevOps, and the amount of Python you have to write as a DevOps engineer, there's a ton of it. Man.
Python, Ruby, Ansible. I mean, Ansible's not a language, but yeah. I was joking the other day, like YAML has become a programming language, even though we don't want it to be. But the back end for Ansible is Python. I mean, everything is written in Python, right? So if you need to write custom modules, Python is awesome to know. I still attest that Go is the next Python. So I think everyone needs to know. In my opinion, system administrators coming from an ops background, if you don't know at least one language, you might as well you might as well lay yourself off now. That's my opinion. If you're not going to go learn a language, you better. Like, that's my opinion.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
For me personally, sorry, Disco Kid. Go ahead.
But I was just going to say that I've played with Python a little when I had my Raspberry Pi. It was the best way to interface with the GPI opens that I found.
Yep. Yeah, learn Python. Like that actually. So I began, well, again, this is going to date me. My first programming language was Turbo Pascal, and then my second one was C. So you're actually learning something useful. So
I was not that much behind you. My first one was HTML3.
HTML isn't a language. It's like YAML. They're not languages.
It is.
So it's a markdown language.
It is to get the groundwork, but back in our day, that was something so big before Python came out. I think Python came out 2008, right?
Or a little earlier than that. I think it was like 2006. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I know I'm dating myself too. So,
well, this is something I'll admit. I never learned HTML ever. I'm like,
No.
I've never learned HTML.
Have you? You've not like even touched it.
I don't care to learn it. I have zero care to learn HTML.
Yeah, that was one of the first things I did too. Was like 7-year-old JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. Played around with those quite a lot.
I'm more interested in back end stuff. I have zero care about HTML, and I
didn't know about the back end then. I'm all in the back end now.
I have, and when it comes to like building like web design and stuff, I have all the creativity of a cheese grater. So
who cares about HTML and CSS when you can learn Nginx and Apache?
Oh, for me, it's all about back end systems and lower level kernel stuff. That's what I care about.
For me, I'm still heavily involved with the film industry and the music industry. So I've been kind of going back and forth with the tech community. And once I've learned that Linux got a little bit better a couple months ago, I decided to jump straight back into Linux and get back to what I was doing. I had to go to Windows a couple months ago because I had a very bad time trying to do something. It was for a project of mine that I was helping a friend of mine with, and he does DJ. He's a DJ on one of the big stations, and they use Audition, and Audacity could not handle anything for it. So I jumped on Microsoft for that 9 months. I never want to go back.
Let's see. It's 4. I gotta go, guys. But we're gonna be doing this again. Thank you for coming. And I'm always hanging out in the Matrix channel, sudoshow on matrix.org. And feel free to reach out to me on Telegram. I'm pretty easy to get a hold of for the most part, since I'm not traveling these days. So, and if you guys have any questions, like self-hosted. I'll follow up with you on your question about Ceph, on the caveats, and I'm probably going to see if we can build out an episode or a tutorial, like a video tutorial on Ceph. So.
Yeah. We mostly use Proxmox for the hypervisors that are utilizing Ceph anyway, so it's really easy for that. So.
Proxmox is apparently supposed to manage it. I don't know how well it does it, but I've never used it. So.
Bye, Brandon. It was awesome to meet you. Talk to you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Brandon.
Good to meet you too. Thank you guys.
Thanks for coming, and thank you all for staying 42 minutes over time. And this was really great. We've got some episode ideas. We answered some questions. It was a good time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right,
Later. Until next time.